All right, good morning. Today we're going to talk about design block. I have actually gone ahead and created 3 different tests that we're going to look at today. So I've created an acceptance test, a cutting test, and a descriptive analysis test. And you'll notice that that is the test type I chose when you are creating a new test in RedJade. Okay. Now I did that because when you get to the design block, the design block is different for each of these types of tests, okay? And so let's go ahead and look at those. So the first one we're gonna look at is a typical acceptance test. How much do you like products, all right? And I'm gonna go ahead and click straight to the design block. I've already completed all of the other steps. And you'll notice I also created a ranking and a preference. I wanna show a couple things there as well. So when you have an acceptance test open, this is the same as true for other and qualitative. You'll notice that by default, RedJade will build you a Williams square design using Latin squares. Sorry, a Latin squares design using Williams squares, right? So if you look here in our design block, so let's just look at rows 1001 through 1012. Right, so if you look there, you'll notice that each block of 6, so I have 6 samples, with an even number of samples, it takes that same number of samples for full balancing. What I mean by that is that each product is evaluated in each fixed position one time. You'll notice each of the 6 colors is represented here in the first block of 6 and the second block of 6. You'll also notice that that happens in every position, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, right? You'll also notice that every product follows each other product once as well. And this is true regardless of the test type that you choose, right? So for example, if I just look at the yellow product, right? Yellow's first, yellow follows blue, yellow follows dark green, yellow follows light green, yellow follows red, yellow follows orange. Now we can look at that in total. So that's as you go through your design, you think people are going to show up for your test, but they aren't because they're nervous about being around a lot of other people. You can, if you only have 60 people instead of 100, you are balanced, right? As long as you hand out those design lines in order. And you'll see that if we look at our entire position balance here, you'll see that each product, I made 156 design lines, is evaluated in each fixed position 26 times, 156 divided by 6. So that's our entire design as well. You also notice that pair tallies tells you how many times each product follows each other product, and you'll see 26 times as well, okay? So you'll notice that here too. Now you have some other options that are available to you in design block. So let's say we are building out this ranking and preference. Right now, I made these, if I look at my questionnaire real quick, I made these as after a set of multiple samples. Right, so if I go to my design block here, I'm gonna drag the products, you'll notice the middle turns blue. Okay, when the middle turns blue, that means that the products are in the same group. Okay, and you'll notice when our design rebuilds, that our products are in the same group here. They're rotated and balanced, but are in the same group, okay? Now, if I go ahead and add samples 1, 2, and 3 to a group, and I do the same with 4, 5, and 6, again, I'm just dragging and dropping until that middle turns blue, okay? Now, you'll notice here, once our design block rebuilds, which is a little slower with everybody on Zoom meetings all over the country, right, we get our balanced block design here. Now, it's a little bit difficult to tell that it is balanced because the color samples have changed to these groups, right? We actually added a new feature pretty recently where you can click on actions and you can click on color by sample, and it will go back and color the samples based on the colors that you've applied here. Okay, they're still grouped, but the color samples have been changed. And that was actually by one of our users. We went out to lunch with them and they asked one of our developers if they could have that. So we added this in here. Okay, and what's nice is it makes it easy to track the samples so you have a visual as to what that design looks like. Okay. Now, I created these preference and rankings, and remember they're after samples. So I need to drag those up and add them to the end. You'll notice that what I do is I add it to the end of the group of samples. That's going to link that group of samples there. Okay. And we'll wait a second for it to load. And then we have our design block here. You'll notice that the 99s are different colors. Okay, 99 representing a non-sample questionnaire, which these are because we switched it to after samples. All right, a couple of other things. Let's go ahead and approve this. Let's say we decided we wanted to add a demographics questionnaire, right? So I'll just create a questionnaire. I'm going to copy an existing questionnaire, and I'm going to copy demos, right? And we'll just copy it. It doesn't really matter what it says. We'll go ahead and copy this. You'll notice I have already visited my design block, right? So from here, if I click on design block, you'll notice that that demographics questionnaire is nowhere to be found, right? So if I click edit, I can actually go in, I can click on the questionnaires, and I can select to add that questionnaire to my design. So I click to add, I click submit, and now I have this demos questionnaire available to me as well. So someone asked, when you have the two groups that I showed, so these two groups of products, does that mean that only 3 samples will go to pre-preference and 3 to ranking? You can set these groups however you want to. In this case, what I did is I set a group of 3 to preference and a group of 3 to ranking. Right now, you could put all 6 in one group, and you could ask a preference or a ranking. You could put 5 in one group. So there's lots of different options. It doesn't have to be 2 groups of 3. RedJade will try to balance the first position the best it can first. Okay. So then we can move demos up into our design. And when we're done here, we can click approve. So I wanted to show you a couple of other things on here, a couple of more advanced features, right? So I'll show you importing in a second, but let's click edit. And on advanced options, you'll see I have a couple different choices, right? Wave size, incomplete block, design mode, okay? So let's start with wave block. Now, incomplete block won't work in this case because we have groups of products, right? So let's go ahead and click on wave size. And what wave size was originally designed for is for serving something like pizza, where every 8 people get a slice, right? And what you want to do is you want to make sure that all of those pizza slices are being used. So I've now set the wave size to 8 here. And what you will see is that the first 8 design lines match. The second 8 design lines match. The third 8 design lines match, right? You could set it to 2 if you're doing sandwiches, or 3 if you're doing a salad at a quick serve restaurant, right? You can change those settings for wave size to produce the same design block in repeat however many times you set the wave size for, okay? If you wanted to do sessions, you might do 10, right? So everybody in that session sees products in the same order because you have to heat everything. So you have lots of options here that you can use with wave size. Okay, I'm going to change wave size back to 1 and click submit here. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and approve this and then download it. So let's go ahead and click approve, and then let's download this. All right, let's export our block. And what I want to show you is importing the block and how you prepare a block for importing, okay? Now I made this ugly, but that's okay. We can fix it. All right, so let's go ahead. Chris, I made this hard on myself, didn't I? So when you're importing your block, I'll show you a couple things. One is, So I exported block. What I did is I used RedJade to do the heavy lifting. I get the majority of my design out. And then if I need to do something that RedJade doesn't support, I can easily tweak my design and then re-import it. So what I do is I delete my cover sheet and my last sheet as a starting point. They're not needed any longer, right? And I forgot to do one thing. I made my life harder. I apologize. What I should have done first is uncheck.
I think that's a good example though. Sorry.
Yeah, so you'll notice, no, that's great. So you'll notice I used the 3-digit codes here when I exported. This is actually bad practice. I should not have done this. It will not actually allow me to put my design back into RedJade. I have to use the sample identifiers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So from design block, I need to uncheck the use assign blinding codes button so that they turn into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I need to export my block. All right, now let's go ahead and open this. So from here, again, I'm going to delete sheet 1 and 3. Okay. I'm going to delete my top row, right? And I'm going to delete my first column. So the ID numbers, any headings I'm getting rid of. This file is now uploadable into RedJade. You can use the name when you're uploading as well. In fact, it's easier. Okay, so you can just match the questionnaires up and we'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to go back into my design. And I'm going to click this little down arrow and I'm going to click import block. Right, so from here, I'm going to browse for my file, folder, and there we go. All right, so we have our block import. I'm going to click next. So it's going to map automatically my demos to demos, but I can easily choose what questionnaire. If that's not correct, I can choose the questionnaire I want to do, right? I can also decide how many days I want and how many servings I want in a given day. Okay, so I have lots of options here as well. All right, I click submit. It's going to import my block. Now my block is going to exactly match this, but that's okay. And now I have my imported design block here. Okay. And then all I would need to do when I'm done is click on the use assign blinding codes button, and it would go back to being the 3-digit codes for each sample. Okay. Now the last thing I want to.
The one thing I would add to that is when you're importing a block and you have preferences and rankings, that you want to make sure that you specify what the max samples are during the import. What the max samples are is going to look at the previous servings.
Here, let's go ahead, Chris, and just re-upload it. Here, let's just throw it in so that you can just point it out. This is the part you talked to me about yesterday. Okay, there.
Yeah, so you'll see that max samples field to the right. You don't have to fill it out for something like a demo where it's not relevant to samples, but something like a preference needs to look at how many samples prior to it. So this is where you indicate the value. In this case, you had 3 samples before the preference and 3 samples before the ranking. And that will pull in the sample codes for that many samples.
And that is also clarified. Thanks, Chris. That's also clarified in the support document as well. So if you click support and you scroll down to work with design block, there is an import a design block button. Right. So, so somebody asked, what about if you want to test 4 samples sequential monatically and then do a complete paired comparison between the 4 samples? So if you could type to me if you want to reserve the samples or not, that would be helpful. So I'm going to click approve, and I'm going to show you one more thing here under actions. Okay, no reserve. So you would do the exact same thing that we just did. So in this case, what's going to happen with the design is when you do the preference, you're showing the 3 samples, and then this preference questionnaire is going to automatically read in those 3 sample codes. You would do the same with 4 products. And your preference questionnaire would just need to have a preference on it, and it would automatically pull in when you group those samples together, right? So if I add a design, and let's go back here again. If I add a design, the original design I had, right? My 3 products, and I link preference afterwards, that's going to automatically read in these 3 samples here, right? And let's say you had a 4th. Okay. Now you're reading 4 samples into the preference automatically. Here, we can even pull these out, right? So this is the exact test. You want this preference is a preference after multiple samples. Okay, so it's going to automatically read in those 4 codes when it gets to the preference here. Okay. All right, last thing here is if we click on actions, we can also edit our blinding codes, right? So if you don't like the blinding codes, you can edit them here. All right. Okay, let's move on to our next design block. So I'm going to click on my dashboard and I'm going to go to a cutting test. Now the cutting test will be significantly quicker here, but I'm going to click on design block and you'll notice cutting has this extra option, enforce serving order, right? By default, in a cutting test, the serving order is unenforced, right? You can do whatever you want to the design. It doesn't really matter because the serving order is unenforced. Only if you enforce the serving order does the order you serve these matter, okay? Now, the one step I would do here in this case is on my questionnaire for this test, instead of having it be confirm, I would instead choose verify. That requires the person to type in the 3-digit code instead of RedJade telling them the next product from the design order. Okay, but none of these linking, none of this matters. All that matters is that your serving order is unenforced. There is one more rule on a cutting test. I know we're not talking about cutting tests today, but there is one more rule. When you're done with all 6 samples, you'll get a little I'm finished button. You have to click that button to exit out. Once you click that I'm finished button, you can't go back in and edit any products. Okay, the person can't log back in as themselves. You can also re-enter a 3-digit code and pull up your answer sheet to aid in discussion. So a couple cool features here in cutting test. And that's all I'm going to show you in cutting test is that the design block is a little bit different. Okay, so let's go back to our dashboard. Let's go to a descriptive test, right? So let's go to our design block. And you'll notice it's the same as the acceptance test, but different, right? So in this case, the design mode here is called this preparation groups. And in acceptance test, it's called day planning, right? And so you'll notice that we have some different options up here. Now these options are automatically shown to us if we choose a descriptive analysis as our test type, okay? Now you can get to them in an acceptance test by clicking advanced options and changing your design mode. Okay, so it's all reachable regardless of the type of test you choose. What we have done have made it display your repetitions, etc., things that you are more likely to use in a descriptive analysis test are now up and displayed for you. Okay, you'll see that this test setup is exactly the same, right? We have all of our 6 samples here. They are in a sequential monadic balance block design. If we were to look at our position distribution, it's not going to be super impressive since we only have 16 design lines, but it's going to be balanced as best as it can. Now you're going to get 2 or 3 here, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at how this works. So you'll also notice that I have this day assignment is interlaced. I'll show you what that means. If I group products together, just like I did in my other test here, what you're going to see is that these blocks will be rotated, right? Now let's add a repetition so it's a little bit more impressive here. Let's go ahead and add 3 repetition. And you'll see that the blocks are rotated. Now, in a descriptive analysis test, many times what you want to do is you want somebody to complete all of one repetition before they, all of one block before they complete the next block. So if I change from interlaced and uninterlaced days and do 1 day per group, you'll see what happens is I get a completely different design. I'm going to get all 3 of sample A, B, and C first, followed by all 3 of 4, 5, and 6 first. Okay. Now the way that RedJade chooses what block is first for everybody is it's the first block that is formed, right? So I can make 4, 5, and 6 first for everybody by undoing my blocks. Okay, so my blocks are undone. Now what I can do is I can go back and I can group 4, 5, and 6 together. Okay, and then group 1, 2, and 3. And you'll see what happens here is now I get block 4, 5, and 6 will be first in my design block, followed by 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Right, so you'll see that here. So it's the first block formed. So that day assignment, I switched from, if I go back to interlaced, you'll see that my design is going to redraw with the 2 blocks of products rotating. Okay, not rotating, but balancing is what I should say. Okay, so you have some other options here. You can add different repetitions. And in this case, you control, if I say I don't want 1 day per group, I can choose how many samples I want per day. I might say 6, right? And now you'll see that my design, instead of only having 3 samples a day, will have 6. So you have more control over your design by clicking here for your descriptive analysis test, right? Again, you still have wave size that you can use here as well. You can still add questionnaires if you need to. You can pull all of your samples out of these groups and it will redraw into your Williams squares, right? So you can do that as well here, okay? And if you really want to blow it all up, you can switch your design mode. And by blow it up, I just mean go back to the other way of planning, to day planning. And now you're literally look just like the acceptance test planning that you had on the other step. Okay, now in this case, if you want to add a day, you're going to click the add a day button. Now, both of these, if you're running a descriptive analysis with your test set up this way, it will absolutely function. All we're trying to do is give you those tools at your fingertips so that you can easily change what products are being evaluated when. Okay. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and click approve, and I'm going to, well, I won't stop the video, I'll edit it later. Does anyone have any questions? I know we got a couple chatted to us. Does anyone have any questions for us today? Can you use that design to have 1 sample repeated per group in the first position? So yes, so let's go ahead and do that. So you have a couple options here. So let's say you want sample A repeated in the first position. What you would do is you would group 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. And then you would put sample A, you'd link it to the beginning, right? So what this does is you'll now see sample 1 is first each day. It should be first for each day.
I think your number of days is conflicting with number of samples, and this is just a bad design and the number of reps.
Yeah. So, but that's how it would work. So you can link it that way as well. There you go. I think that'll actually work now.
Yeah.
I had to make it so it allows the group on day assignments to span days, because this is considered a separate group from this. So there. So now you have that product first each day. Now, if you just put it first, it's only going to ignore that part. This will only show up 1 time. So the first boxes and the last boxes do not repeat. They only show up 1 time. Okay. See that here. You have to put it down into the randomized area of the design block. Okay. right? You can change your day serves. You have a lot of options in here that if you click through, you can almost draw any design block that you want to.